Hi, this is Brian Schwagerl, Professor Schwagerl from Schack Institute of Real Estate. I'm very honored today to be joined with two incredible people from the Cornet organization, and we're hosting this particular chat with students with Cornet. Corporate is the corporate real estate network, the global real estate network, and both Alison and Rob are board members or proud members of the Cornet chapter. Joining us today is Alison Kwiatkowski. She is Vice President of America Business Partner at Deutsche Bank. Alison represents all service lines under corporate services within the region of the bank's 3 million square foot portfolio, including real estate, project delivery, facilities management, engineering, and client services. Alison also operates as the business strategy lead for Deutsche Bank headquarters relocation to 1 Columbus Circle, rebranding the Time Warner Center as Deutsche Bank Center. Prior to her role here at Deutsche Bank, she was embedded as a consultant with the bank with JLL, serving as JLL America's account lead and America's project team lead, as well as holding such roles as regional head of all workplace, occupancy planning, and change management. That's a lot, Alison. So prior to her time with JLL, Alison held consulting roles with DEGW Strategy and Perkin & Wills Architects. Alison has an architecture degree from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's in real estate development from NYU Schack. In regards to professional organization, Alison serves as the programming and outreach chair of Cornet New York City chapter. Thank you for joining us, Alison.
Thank you.
Rob Angilletta is Vice President, Regional Head of Real Estate for Deutsche Bank. Rob has been serving as the America's Regional Head of Real Estate in that role, where he's responsible for all decisions over a 3 million square foot portfolio spanning across North, Central, and South America. In the role, Rob provides a portfolio strategy guidance, negotiating and financial planning for the entire portfolio. Prior to joining DB, Rob served as an investment manager for H&A Property Holdings, where he ran an investment strategies for a $5 billion AUM Class A office portfolio across the US. Rob managed the investments and asset management process for the firm, which included acquisitions of 245 Park Avenue for $2.2 billion in 2017. Previous roles for Rob include transaction manager at CBRE and Newmark Knight Frank, where he led the transaction process and strategy development for Morgan Stanley, NBC Universal, and the City of New York. Rob earned his master's degree in real estate development from NYU Schack, and Rob also received his bachelor's degree in business administration, concentration in finance from Fordham University in 2008. He's a proud member of Cornet New York City's chapter as well. So thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Those are quite esteemed resumes. I want to tell you that the people that are joining us today are mostly students that want to know, how did you get into this world of real estate, and what is it like to be a big mucky muck at a German bank? Why don't we start with Rob, and then we'll go to Alison, because we know who really controls all the cards, Rob.
Of course. So, that's a story of a whole another day that'll take an hour long, but short answer is, was a finance major going into the global financial crisis, and jobs were not available in that industry.
Sounds familiar.
And what's that?
I said it sounds familiar.
Yeah, sounds very familiar. So found an opening for a role at Newmark in their finance and capital markets, and with zero real estate experience, decided why not go in full head and make it work. And here we are over 12 years later, still in the industry.
Yeah. So you moved from capital markets and you were involved in asset management. For people that don't understand what the difference between the two are, and then how you ended up where you are today, can you explain it a little bit to them?
Sure. So looking at the capital markets side, you look at a number of different types of investments, particularly into real estate. You're looking at the debt side, trying to finance debt projects for a number of commercial projects. Industrial projects, can be residential. Also look at refinancing of some loans that are on certain assets. So you're looking at it from a purely financial aspect, where on the asset management side, you're looking at the day-to-day and what makes the life and the heartbeat of a building. So you're looking at the leases and negotiating the tenants that are in those buildings and certain capital projects that are needed to make the building up to standards, new technology and things like that. So really changing it into more of the brick and mortar side.
Right. So both of those things were excellent to go into right at the beginning of a bad market, correct?
Of course, that's exactly right.
So we're telling students that as well, and we're actually seeing interest in banks looking in that area. Explain why that is.
Well, even though you have a down market, there always are opportunities that you can find in those markets. Sometimes you have distressed assets where you can look into, where you can take something that's drowning and you can salvage it and make it into a good opportunity. And you'll get it in sort of pricing that can be advantageous to a future result.
And how did your involvement with 240 Park Avenue come
Actually, I had just joined H&A as they were going through the bidding, and that went out to a proper bid. CBRE was marketing it just like any other building that they would in New York, and went through the valuation with H&A, came to the conclusion of how they wanted to see that building out for the future, and help evaluate the Argus models with them, negotiating the purchase and service agreements with them, and ultimately getting them to the closing.
And did you have a background at Fordham that taught you Argus, or was that something that you kind of jumped into early in your career?
Argus jumped into at Newmark. So had finance experience, so you at least understood the basic financial principles and formulations, but really getting into the nitty gritty of Argus was once I was on the job.
I bring that up because at SHAC for the undergraduates, we have a number of workshops that are coming up on financial modeling and how important that is in this job market to be able to understand how to do those things. It's interesting. Were you always a good negotiator as a little boy?
No, that was something I grew into as I got more confident in myself. Maybe you could say my mother or father said I was good at negotiating for certain snacks at the end of the day, but in terms of the business world, understanding the financials and how the negotiations could change a valuation of a building was really helpful for me to get my hands dirty in Argus models and knowing that certain percentage fees could change great results to a building. It was really understanding it from that aspect is what helped me become a better negotiator, because I actually knew what those meant at the end of the day.
We'll come back to you in a second because I know Alison has been very instrumental in your career as well.
Sure.
She has been with a number of people. Alison, you and I know each other for a while now through our involvement with Cornet. Since this is a Cornet sponsored event with NYU, and we appreciate that. Speak a little bit about your involvement with Cornet, what it's meant over the years, and then we'll get into what it is that you do now.
Sure. So I've been a Cornet member now, I think well over 10 years. And to be honest, I somewhat owe my career to Cornet. I started similar time as Rob, 2008. The economy was crashing, and I was an architect and who was building in a recession. So I worked for the only client that had money left, the United Nations. And while I was at the United Nations in-house for a couple of years,
when America was paying its rent.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Just checking.
Yeah. International territory, Brian. At that time I joined Cornet, and that was really how I built my network. That was how I found my next role at Deutsche Bank. That was how I built the connections I had at JLL, which kind of how I jumped over, still staying within Deutsche Bank, but a bigger role, stronger company, and going in-house to DB. So over time, I've had a series of different roles and become more and more involved.
Introduction there. So we're going to go over each and every one of them because I think it's really important. And also knowing you, it's that variety that gets you excited and also has led to you in this pinnacle project that we're going to talk about shortly. But early on, you talked about you had this architectural degree, but where could you put it to work? No one was letting you design buildings, but you found work in workplace strategy, right?
Yes.
That's kind of a unglamorous term, but a very interesting work and so necessary, even more so again today, right?
Uh,
So tell us a little bit
It's,
about workplace strategy and what that role it plays in real estate.
yeah, I think right now it's in high demand as a lot of companies look at their portfolio and realize, do we really need the space if people aren't coming back to the office? Do we need to keep the space we have, or how can we convince people to come back to the office, or what does the office now actually have to be, given our new future here? So it's a little bit of strategy, a little bit of math, a little bit of architecture, tiny bit of finance, just to understand how to make the business case actually work, so that if you implement a workplace strategy, it pays for itself on the real estate end. So it's very multidisciplinary. I thought it was interesting at the time. And again, it's become much more trendy these days than it was when I first started doing it. I think now everybody thinks they know workplace strategy because they read, a few articles on Forbes, and um, so I'm
But
interested.
we really have a handle on workplace strategy right now as we're going through this transition.
Yes.
Interesting.
Well,
I don't know. We could talk a little bit more about that, but it's really important to figure out occupancy planning, isn't it?
yep,
Uh,
100%.
what you're doing now, and how does that come about? Do you open up closets and discover people hiding, or is it oh my God, we need bigger trading floors, more technology? How do you get your hand around what the future is when the future changes constantly?
Yeah, I think, it's different at the bank right now because a lot of the focus is on the larger strategy of the bank and recruitment, and how are we using our workplace as a tool to demonstrate like the story as of an American arm of a German bank. So it's definitely taken on a different approach because it's so intertwined with the actual brand of the bank, and our larger strategy of what we're trying to demonstrate within the US market. But I think it changes where the particular firm is kind of in their development. For some people it's a cost driver. For some people it's how to serve their talent. It definitely, if a good workplace strategy is aligned with the larger business.
Right. And so I think that's where creativity comes into play as well. I mean, it's one thing to know the numbers, the square footage, to
Yep.
negotiate a price or a location. Um, but then what do you do with that location? So you really took a bold move, if I could say that, moving this gigantic behemoth out of the financial district and right into the middle of Midtown. Uh,
Yes.
you drove a hard bargain, I'm sure, with Rob's help, because
Of
you're
course.
walking into Time Warner's shoes. How do you change an iconic place like the Time Warner Center and to make it what are we calling it now? Deutsche Bank's America
We're
Place,
calling it Deutsche Bank Center.
the Deutsche Bank Center. Yeah,
Yes.
that'll roll off my lips shortly. But so you talk about the branding there. Are you adding? Is it something you is it advertising your location? Is it more about just making the people that are coming into new offices more comfortable about where they're working? I mean, it's a huge change for a bank that really
Yeah.
was so intricately a part of the rebuilding of downtown Manhattan.
And I think that was the tough decision for the bank because they looked at where their priorities were, and the things that were important to the bank were our sustainability initiatives, our clients being very client centric, and also being a little bit more modern and kind of breaking away from the older reputation of the bank in this fresh start, and of all of the sites. the location of the Deutsche Bank Center, which if the more times I say it over this call, it'll stick. The location, the better location is for both our clients and our employees, the ties to Central Park, the opportunities for better entertaining space and amenity space to serve employees. I think it was just a clear win. And working within an existing building was helpful for us to meet a very aggressive schedule. We were looking at other new builds, but because of our schedule, we were a little bit hesitant. But we are doing a full gut of the building, so it will look nothing like the Time Warner Center did. We're keeping the retail, of course, but the inside will be fully gutted. We're adding terraces overlooking the park. Breaking down walls and ceilings, and it will be quite beautiful, and refacing the front of the building, which I'm sure people have seen if they've driven by. They've seen the scaffolding up.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned, I think, really is an amazing amenity. Since I used to work at the Hearst Tower across the street, just having the park at your front door is just absolutely just so helpful. To be able to take a break into nature, especially this time of year in the fall. I miss it tremendously working where I am. But having said that, you also are going to have, I looked at some renderings that were posted. You're going to have spectacular views of the park.
It will be incredible. We go from a building now where there is, no signs of sunlight until you get above the 26th floor, to telling people that they might need sunglasses to sit at their desks. It's going to be gorgeous.
Yeah, well, that's great. And you mentioned sustainability, right? So all that natural light pouring in obviously lets you use less electricity for the light that you have in your space. And we think of Germany as being more progressive than America, particularly when it comes to sustainability. What kind of sustainable measures are you taking? And I just recently had a conversation with my students in the classroom about this. Is it altruistic, or is it really a situation where your board, your shareholders demand this of you? And because you're European, is it mandated by the German government?
Yeah, so I think it's more of an employee demand these days than a stakeholder demand. So our basic design standards were set for LEED Silver. So anything we do, we would qualify for LEED Silver. But for this building, we're trying to go a little bit further beyond that. But then it's also the design of the workplace itself. So for example, we're pulling all the offices on the interior so that every single staff member has a view of the exterior. That's one of the most important things for us. We have 2 different terrace areas so that all employees, clients will have staff access to their terraces. We have well-being pods. We have a health center. It's a very European concept. It is.
Oh no, we hear this all the time now, that resiliency instead of sustainability, well-being. During the pandemic, you said it's not one of those machines that they put in Google where you go to sleep, is it?
No. You can sleep. You can check your BMI. You can you can do all of your health stats in a very private way. So it's like a secure health concierge service that's very private. That is part of our employee amenities offering.
Interesting. You mentioned concierge services. Your background is in facilities and facility planning. Tell me a little bit what concierge aspect of real estate has taken over in the corporate world.
Yeah, so I think it's much more focused on the user and you're seeing it more and more. You're seeing, especially with tenants now, or with landlords. Landlords are kind of fighting to see which landlord can have the nicest tenant amenities because it's become so competitive. I think employees are basically asking us, how can this building serve me? And perfect example, Rob and I are constantly on calls, trying to maximize not only within the building, but within our partnerships, what can we do to better serve our employees, whether it's discounts or other services we can have, anything that can be a potential value add that our team can provide staff, I think we know that that is particularly important these times.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the park, but you're also standing above one of the most used subway stations in New
Yes.
York City.
Yep.
It's been upgraded substantially. Are you nervous about people coming back into the office? Are the subways and the crime situation and the working from home, will that all be resolved when your office building is done, do you think? Or do you think you're just preparing for a different way that people will go to the office?
I think we're working on the assumption that New York will come back and will be in a state that we all know and love of New York by the time we move. Our CEO is on the mayor's COVID response council. She's very involved with what the city is doing, and she feels confident we'll be in that point. So, we are assuming all staff can come back when we move, and it will be a safe environment.
Yeah. It'll be actually a good form of civic responsibility and a time of celebration when it opens, I would think.
Exactly.
Just something that you could be proud of. So moving these employees, I don't know exactly how many are we talking about from downtown to Columbus Circle?
About 5,000, give or take.
Okay. That's a huge change management issue.
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
Eventually we'll go back to Rob, but change management is something that they don't teach you often in school, but is that you learn hard on the job. But it's such an integral part of your job, isn't it?
Yes. I think change management is the most important part of getting a project like this off the ground. So much of it is making people excited for the future and on board with the change, and it's getting that senior sponsorship to motivate their teams. It's alleviating staff concerns, making staff feel heard. So we spend a good amount of time of every project prepping, but now that we're about a year out from our first moves, this is a huge focus of ours. We have workplace champions set up for each of the staff members, so they have a trusted person that we train that they can talk to. We have comms materials going out, videos, an internet site, that sort of thing. But yes, to make people kind of come on board for the journey, I think you need a team that's dedicated just to change management.
Right. So it's interesting. You manage all of those areas, which is just amazing. You got your arms going on all at once. But so from the creative standpoints, from the Office of the Future, from negotiating the deal to the move and the change, is that what excites you about your job, the variety of things, or is that what you end up pulling your hair out about?
Well, luckily I have Rob to negotiate the deal because I am a crap negotiator. But yes, but all those other parts, that's why I took the role I did, because I love having my hand in a little bit of everything, and seeing how it can all come together, and helping kind of be the peacekeeper between these many parties to get it moving forward.
So Rob, you're the negotiator. Most people thought, well, they'll end up in the World Trade Center. They have the ability to work with the trading floors that are already set up for the new building, or maybe they'll end up at Hudson Yards. That's where all the big boys are going right now. You're not that far away. You are on the west side, but did they underestimate you? Did you always have this idea of possibly Columbus Circle in your back pocket?
Well, I think to the point that Alison made earlier, what was the most enticing about Columbus Circle was that timing. I mean, we were running up against a significant potential of holdover rents that we would have had to pay if we stayed even a day late. We would have had to commit to a 5-year extension of term at our existing facility if we could not get out in time and wanted to avoid holdover penalties. So moving into a World Trade Center site, moving into Hudson Yards, there were a lot of red flags because construction was still going on at that time. Even in potential discussions of being anchor tenants for some of these buildings, there were a lot of things that needed to fall into place in order for us to finally commit to one of those buildings. So Columbus Circle was just that natural choice because we were able to get the building in time in a construction timeline that met our needs and requirements.
Was the trading floor an issue? I mean, where did you take over the old CNN studio?
That's essentially
Ceiling heights. That's why I'm asking.
correct, and that's essentially where that's going to be placed in the building. So it was a natural kind of plug and play fit for us.
It's actually, they will be the most incredible trading floors in all of New York. Brian, I can't wait to give you a tour.
About their trading floor.
No. Trust me.
This time it's the truth.
It is. They will be incredible.
What makes them so incredible?
We have, 20-foot plus ceilings. We'll have a mezzanine that runs through the trading floor so that you can look down onto the trading floor. On that mezzanine, we'll have all of our trading amenities. A lot of times trader floors don't actually have amenities in the trading floor because you maximize your trading space. Now that's kind of, you get the bird's eye view. The ceiling is all, custom woodwork. It's just going to be jaw-dropping. And we have 500 plus traders on the floor with views of Central Park on a 20-foot glass. So just telling you, I cannot wait to give you and your students at the time a tour when we are done. I'm very proud of our trading floors.
Great. You're beaming from ear to ear. I like that.
It's close to my heart.
So how did you and Rob meet? Where did that come about? Because in order to get a job like this done, you need to surround yourself with, good people, both internally and externally. You're both Shack grads, but you're both Cornet people. Tell me a little bit. Did you see him across the room and eyes met, and you said, "There's my guy. I got to have him over with me at Deutsche."
Rob, can I answer this one?
Go for it.
So Rob and I met at Shack. We were.
Right.
What was the first class we had together?
You were in class together.
Ooh, I think it was a real estate law class.
Yeah, and then we made sure to align our schedules after that. I think we hit it off personally. We have very similar work ethics. We are both kind of like the perfectionist that will not sleep until it's done perfectly. For years, I vented to Rob about how crazy life is at DB, but how much I loved it. And then once there was an opportunity, I called him up and I was like, "You are the only person that needs to be in this role. Will you come in and interview?" And then now we kind of tag team everything together, and it works out very well because we think the same, we work the same, but we have very different views on how to approach deals, how to approach a business. So I think it works well. It's a good balance.
Yeah, I tell students here in my classes to take the strengths test that the Career Planning Institute gives you, because it tells you how to balance what you're really good at and how to surround yourself with other people to work on the things that you're not so good at, but you know that you're taken care of that way. And I think that's very important, not only just to know that from a negotiation standpoint, but also if you're taking on this huge project like you are, where are those gaps and how do you fill them?
Yeah.
So you do the same by externally bringing in partners. How do you do that? I mean, is it all driven from an RFP that goes out and best price wins? We know that the German bank is very strict on money, right, Rob? But you have to make that fit happen, and you're employing thousands of people in this project as you go forward, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So from a facilities and construction standpoint, we did have an RFP that did go out. So currently we have CBRE that's providing a number of services for us, from transaction management services to project management services and construction. They are dealing facilities with us. So it was a full encompassing RFP that was requesting a global relationship for all those facets of the business. And it's unlike other RFPs, it was a little easier because you knew that the number of companies that were going to be able to respond to that were so few, because there are so few companies that can handle those multifaceted parts of the industry and do that on a global scale as well.
Yeah. So Alison, you mentioned that you had worked for an architectural firm and then also JLL. those are good places for some of our students to start in if they have a way on the ground floor. Some of these. Who are some of the vendors that you're working with? You can name drop.
Sure. So JLL, of course, CBRE, Arup. Arup is an engineering firm, but we actually use their consulting arm, so not their engineers. We have a multitude of engineers we work with. Gensler is our design architect, but we also work with IA, Ted Moodis, HLW.
Wow.
Yeah, so we have
lighting up of the different parts of the project.
Well, so for this project, it's just Gensler with SOM doing the base building, but we have a variety of projects happening all over North and South America at any time. So we try and, distribute out the work to different architects, because if you give too much to one firm, a lot of times they can't handle that kind of volume of work. So you start to lose some of the quality.
So you mentioned the global aspect of what you're doing, or at least within North America. Rob, talk a little bit about that. You're in North and South and Central America. How do you keep your hands tied into what's going on there, while at the same time working on this gigantic project you're on?
So, we do rely a lot on some of the local contacts that we have within DB. We do have certain points of contact in Mexico City, in Toronto, and some of our other South American countries. We do also have constant interaction with our local brokers within those markets, kind of tell us what's going on, keep our ear to the ground as to understand as a critical date is coming up for those locations, where could there be some potential for the bank to really excel in a cost-cutting initiative exercise and still deliver the result. So at the end of the day, the employees that come back to Alison and the business partners are excited and energized and happy with those results.
Yeah. Alison, is it hard to manage the business partners? Are they 800-pound gorillas that say, I know how to run my own business? Who are you, real estate lady, coming in here and telling me I got to move across the street?
Yeah, it's definitely changed over the years.
Real estate lady? That's not right.
So we deal with mainly the COOs of each business line. So like the COO of investment banking, regional leadership, and then the senior leadership within the businesses. And to be honest, I think the people have realized the value of real estate over the past couple of years, that I've seen a very marked change with how we are treated now versus how we were maybe when I joined the bank in 2011. We have a seat at the table. They look to us as advisors, not necessarily, people who are executing this thing. They realize that what we're doing is trying to be in the best interest of the bank. So it's gotten easier over the years. I mean, of course, there's always the challenge here and there, but I think we definitely work in good partnership with the business itself.
Yeah, well, you're an excellent communicator, Alison, but it's one thing to communicate to Rob and bring him in, right? That's the persuasive ability you have to bring him in. But how do you deal with the C-suite? How do you go in and sell the deal to, you said your CEO is a woman? Did that help somewhat, or were you feeling equally as intimidated heading into their office?
I mean, she is tough. So just that, because she is a woman, she is incredibly incredibly well versed in her responsibilities and how a bank works and the kind of the inner workings of the investment side of the bank. So you need to know your numbers. You need to know your business case. You make sure that there is not one single error on one single page of your PowerPoint, because it will be caught quickly. And if there's an error, your whole business case is shot. And just demonstrate, what are your drivers and why is it in the best interest of the bank, and what are you doing to make the bank, we always say leaner, simpler, stronger.
So do you think your background working as a consultant and with JLL perfected your ability to do the pitch, understand the needs of your client, you kind of lived on both sides of the aisle? So
I think that's helped. But to be honest, I think it's just listening. I think people don't take enough time to actually listen before they respond. So if you spend enough time talking to these businesses and hearing like what really are their pain points and trying to respond to that, it goes much further than trying to say, this is what our peers are doing. This is what makes sense from a cost standpoint.
So this is a Cornet program. Uh, how has Cornet helped you besides where do you benchmark with others in the banking world or
Yep.
in the ability to build a skyscraper or new headquarters like you're doing today? I mean, it might have always been the dream to be involved in a project like this, but now that you are, how did you get all of those connections that you currently own?
Yeah, so I'm very involved in Cornet. I go to, most of the events. I spend a lot of time outside of the events talking to people, and that helps me build a network that really supports me in my current role because probably the biggest challenge of my role is I'm expected to know enough about everything to keep me dangerous. So all of the service lines I touch, I need to know when somebody talks to me about the air cooled chiller, what that does. And same as, Rob's business cases of our latest real estate deal. So being able to have a network of people I can lean on and call and say, this is what we're looking at. Does this seem right to you? Who should I talk to in the business? That I think that has helped me just be stronger at my role because I have a whole, support system of people that do a little bit of everything I touch that I can reach out to whenever we have a big decision or just kind of the day to day, just make me smarter.
Yeah, and what kind of you're also the outreach and programming chair. What kind of programs do you put on, and then how would you outreach to our students today?
Yes, so we have 12 different content councils. So basically anything you could think of, we have a committee dedicated to that. So sustainability, strategic planning, public policy. I'm trying to think of what other ones, professional development. So if there is something happening in the industry, we probably have a bucket to help put it in and create content around it. And our goal is to put on, fresh, dynamic material that, that's really helping our members understand what's happening in the industry and how to be, one step ahead in their roles, and be well versed and educated in what's happening. So that is my goal in my current role. And then as far as getting students involved, we have a whole student arm that's the university relations group that helps students come attend events, get involved, get on a committee, build to their network, and put themselves in the best position possible as they look for what the next steps are.
And you make it easy for them because very often you'll comp them to a meeting where they'll only have to pay possibly
Yep.
$10. Right now, I think the fees have been free because a lot of them are on Zoom.
Yep.
But if they wanted a membership, do they have to pay the full membership price, or do you have a reduced membership for them?
There is a reduced membership, and to be honest, I just reached out to see what that reduced membership is to double check, but it's below $50. It's very affordable. I think it basically pays for itself in an event or two.
So it used to be cocktail parties. Are there Zoom meetings?
Yes.
How does one network if you're a student at a Zoom meeting?
So we have breakout groups. So for example, our young leaders do a speed mentoring roundtable that breaks into teams of 5, and I think that's actually been excellent. I've met more people at our like Cornet virtual happy hours and coffee meetups and that sort of thing than I have at events actually, because it forces you to talk to different people rather than sticking to kind of your same comfort zone. So we're making it work, but we are hoping that we will be in person soon.
Yeah, and Rob, as someone who negotiates for a living, how do you use networking to your advantage? How did you use it throughout your career?
So I have met a number of like-minded roles through Cornet, and calling them up, just like Alison has, to say, look, I'm negotiating in these markets. I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z type of landlords. You have offices in these similar markets. What have you seen? How have you handled these interactions? And it gets me more of an arsenal for when I'm ready to go approach a landlord in a negotiation, because I already kind of understand the way their thought process is and the way of trying to make a deal.
Yeah. And what kind of advice would you give students?
The advice is don't be afraid to talk to somebody. It's, we're in the real estate industry, and even though it's real estate, you've got to be social. And if it weren't for our interactions with Alison and I, this is a role that we work together because of that networking aspect. So if there is someone that's out there on LinkedIn or in an event that you go to that you are interested in learning more about what they do, shoot them a note, because most of the people in the industry, you would be surprised at how open they are to having those conversations with you.
Yeah. And how do you negotiate in spaces outside of New York? Is it easier or harder during this COVID world?
So I would say we've had a number of deals that we were negotiating during the time of COVID. The only thing that's difficult, I feel, in a negotiation aspect is if you haven't been able to travel to that site because of COVID, maybe you don't get that flavor of the market. So you really have to rely on the brokers to really get to that understanding. But you do have enough data out there. CBRE, Newmark, Cushman, JLL, they all have their market research reports. You can understand where negotiations can land because you know where the average deal is going to land. So you do have to rely more on the data and analytics rather than the soft touch approach when you were physically at a certain market.
Now, you were a broker, and you also were in asset management, but now you work in corporate in-house. What are the advantages or disadvantages of both?
Well, I think from the brokerage side, being a consultant for companies like NBC Universal and doing stuff with the city of New York with their NYPD, FDNY initiatives, you are able to pivot. So you do see a lot of different facets of the industry. You're not solely focused on financial services. You're focused on media, and you're focused on public, private, and those different industries have different needs and requirements that you need to understand during a negotiation. So being on the consulting side, it gets you that more well-roundedness. Or on the other side, when you're dealing with the asset management world, or you're dealing with being in-house and dealing specifically with that corporate, it's fine-tuning the product that you want to get that end result to. And you figure that out by trial and error of what has worked in the past and what can we do better. And you get to really focus on the more micro approach of that portfolio.
Yeah, Alison, one of the sad things about this pandemic has been the drop-off of women in the workplace, women that have risen to considerable heights and now have to go back and having difficulty managing the home, people doing homeschooling, etc. You recently had a new baby girl, is it?
Girl, yep.
Thank you. How do you do it all, Alison? Look at all those people you're managing, all those different business entities, all those consultants. You're moving a mega corporation from downtown to Columbus Circle. It's a weight of the world on your shoulders there. How do you handle that? And what kind of advice would you give young women interested in entering the field?
Yeah, it's a lot. I think the pandemic has been incredibly challenging. I think the stat is 800,000 women have permanently left the workforce in the US, and it's like 1 in 4 are reconsidering their roles. And it does not surprise me because I think it's incredibly difficult to balance, and it's very sad. And I'm lucky. I have a lot of help. I know a lot of people who don't have the same the same good fortune that I do with the help that I have. And I I will say that Deutsche Bank has done an excellent job with putting their employees first, and they're one of the first firms that came out and they said, we want everyone to feel comfortable now that you do not have to come back to the office if your role does not require it. And so, they put out a statement that, staff do not have to come back until we move to our new headquarters. And it was, it was something that was not challenged. It was just, let us know if you want to come back in. If not, we're going to assume you're staying home.
Yeah, that's a huge change though. And then puts pressure on you of what are they coming back to? On the
Yes.
trade floor aspect, Rob, you have all these traders that are now working from home. Is it, I mean, it's got to be some view that Alison's creating there to get them back into the office, don't you think?
Well, she said it's the greatest trading floor in the industry, so they're going to be coming back to that rather than sitting on their dining room table. So yeah, look, we've all been making it work over the last few months. I myself have been one of the few employees that have been going to the city a couple days a week over the last few months and still visiting 60 Wall Street. So, it is nice to finally get back into the world and a sense of normalcy, but the safety of our employees is number one. And if the comfort is to stay home, then stay home.
Yeah, but the workforce of tomorrow, Alison, particularly the mentoring we talked about of young women in the workplace, that's very hard to do over a Zoom call, right?
It is difficult, and that's why, we're kind of counting down the days until life does go back to normal, because it's not the same. I think in some ways, there are more opportunities. I will reach out to people, and say, can we set up a phone call? And it's easier to set up a phone call a lot of times than set up a coffee, and maybe that expedites that relationship. But it is not the same. So hopefully, there's only a matter of time before we're all back in person.
Well, we're very happy that the two of you made yourselves available to us. What kind of last words or of advice would you like to give our students, and how can they join the Cornet network?
I'll let you start, Alison.
Okay. I would say with an organization like Cornet, it's really what you put into it. I hear people all the time be like, I'm a Cornet member, but I'm not getting anything out of it. I think like Cornet or any other industry organization or network opportunity, you have to put in the time, and it takes a long time to build relationships. So do not expect a quick win of a job opportunity or work opportunity or any of that. It takes years, but it will be worth it. And it's, the more you put in, the more energy you put in, and the more sincere and authentic you are with people, the more it will work out for you.
Yeah, and you mentioned to us, Alison, you are on the board and you do manage a whole bunch of areas at Cornet at the same time. You really are coming across as superwoman on this call. But for some of our listeners, they don't know you put together the Cornet Scholarship as well, and these
Yes.
have an opportunity to apply for that. Explain that to them a little bit.
So there is a Cornet scholarship. I know this year is a little bit different because of the pandemic, but I'm sure it will be full-fledged next year. So apply to the scholarship. It gets you both money towards school and a Cornet membership and opportunities to get involved and get on a committee and meet some of our great members. So it's an excellent opportunity.
And Rob, what would you have to offer in terms of telling people about your experience at Cornet, and then also how to get into the career that you're in today?
Yeah, so just to really add on to what Alison had said before, it really is what you make of it. And I would say in the beginning, when I was working at Newmark and CBRE, there were certain events where I would walk out saying, was that the best use of my time or not? But as I've grown into Cornet, I've hosted a number of events over the past few months during the pandemic, and you really are surprised at just how engaged this industry really is. And they really want to know and learn from other people's experiences. So you are going to gain that knowledge base. And getting into this industry, you're going to need to find a mentor that you really trust. And going to these events or talking to people just for 5 minutes and really getting to know who they are, you will find someone that you can connect closely with and really confide in them to helping you grow within the industry. So it's definitely important to do that from a networking aspect.
I would be remiss if I let both of you go without asking what your shack education has meant to you, and besides meeting your work partner for life, What else can you share with us?
So for me, Shack was really the way for me to become more well-rounded. I had the financial knowledge background, I had the negotiations background, but I really wanted to understand more in terms of the brick and mortar. So becoming a real estate development concentration within the Shack program really got me understanding the construction side, and even knowing more about that now from going through Shack, it even helps me more in those negotiations. As I mentioned earlier in this call, the more you understand, the more you know that a negotiation piece will move the needle. So understanding HVAC capacities and kilowatt usage in a building can have significant impact to your cost as a user. So understanding how that works and how that function, can become a part of that deal just makes you a better at your job.
Yeah, I did see recently some photos of some engineering feat that you did at Columbus Circle. Were you involved with that?
Oh yes.
Explain it to the audience.
So those are the chillers that were being hoisted up. Yeah, so look, that was a lot of coordinating with the city, making sure they had their walkthroughs to get the permitting approved, and getting that done through a pandemic was not easy because you couldn't get an inspector to get to the site. That was a lot of extra gray hairs on the head because of that. But to see that video of them getting hoisted up really made it all worth it.
And Alison had mentioned engineering is a huge part of any major project nowadays, particularly after post-pandemic with the air handling systems, et cetera. The other thing is you're in such a prominent location in New York City. Were you nervous at all about the security and safety issues? I mean, you are a bank. How did you handle that? That's a whole nother area that you have to become an expert in, right, Alison?
Yes, so we have a security consultant, and we have a very enhanced security system both on the street, from protecting ourselves from cars potentially driving up to the sidewalk. We have blast protection. We have a series of security measures that we're very well protected, and we have a team that's kind of watching it 24/7 and on top of it. And then on top of that, we are looking at our employee security. So working on our, ID badging system, making it a little bit more integrated into our smart building system so that we have a safe and secure environment, and things are a little bit more user friendly, but discreet. So nobody wants to see the days of, what we used to have at 60 Wall Street of uniformed men with guns in front of our entrance. But it is much more secure today, even though it's not necessarily in your face.
Yeah, you mentioned security, and you mentioned branding and safety. All of these things come into play when you have to open in a post-pandemic world. The Cornet academic challenge this year is reviewing or advising companies like yourself from Fortune 500 companies, banks, investment banks, communication companies, how to handle that type of world. Are you accessible to students that might be entering that challenge, that they could draw upon you for advice?
Of course, always.
You're always open. I want to say thank you again to Alison and Rob. This was a delightful conversation. I learned a lot about your new project, about your portfolio, and it just was fun to get to know you both a little bit better. So thank you for Zooming with me. Thank you for sharing Cornet with our NYU audience, and I wish you nothing but best of luck in the future.
Well, thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.